Welcome to Fearless Do More. Today's guest is Anna Gibson, co-founder of Micro Scooters.
We've basically changed consumer behaviour. People don't drive to school, they scoot to school in London, and that's the whole premise for the business is a greener, cleaner, healthier way to get to school. They chanced upon this scooter and loved it and wouldn't get off it, and my sister and I thought, wow, they look pretty amazing. We sort of tracked one down, and he basically spent the next year scooting around London on the scooter, and it completely changed my life as a mother.
Your whole business and your career has come out of this sort of sliding doors moment of your son trying out somebody else's. If that sliding door had gone in the other direction and he had never tried that, what do you think you would have done?
Oh gosh.
Anna, welcome.
Thank you.
Thank you for joining me today. This is a subject close to my heart, having been a long-time micro scooter purchaser for various children over the years. So I'm delighted that you've joined me today. The other thing that we have in common is obviously you started life as a lawyer.
I did indeed.
And
yes.
So how on earth does a lawyer move from doing legal stuff into scooters?
Well, actually, I've got even more of a checkered career than that. I mean, I actually did music and history of art at university, so I didn't even study law. And then I went into the law, and I was a lawyer for about 10 years. And I parked that because I started a family, and I knew I wanted to do something, not necessarily carry on with the law. And I looked at a couple of business ideas, so obviously I was itching to do something alongside looking after the children. And then I discovered a scooter. And I suppose in the back of my mind, I thought maybe I would go back to the law, but the rest is history, really. Here I am 25 years later, still selling scooters. So I didn't need to go back to the law. But it did serve very well, actually. The skills you pick up as a lawyer were very helpful in business.
Yeah. And we first met that 25 years ago when you were just starting off there. Why scooters? Where did the idea about getting into scooters came from?
Well, I'd had my first son. We were living in London, and I used to spend a lot of time on Clapham Common because he was a typical, very active boy. And I was in a playground with my sister and her son, and they chanced upon this scooter and loved it and wouldn't get off it. And my sister and I thought, wow, they look pretty amazing. We sort of tracked one down, and he basically spent the next year scooting around London on the scooter, and it completely changed my life as a mother. You know what children are like at that age. They don't necessarily want to sit in their pushchair. They want to go out and do and be. And at 18 months old, which is what he was, there's very little on the market that they could get on and be completely independent and get from A to B. But this solved the problem. It was Swiss design, 2 wheels at the front, 1 at the back, and he had a freedom and an independence that he wouldn't otherwise have had, and he totally loved it. And so did I. And then when eventually he wanted to get into the pushchair, sounds a bit ridiculous, but the practicalities of it were you could put it on the back of the pushchair and the whole thing wouldn't fall over, which just made a huge difference. So it was very portable. And it was so light as well that a 2-year-old, 18-month-old could sort of pick it up and down pavements and stuff. So I just absolutely loved it. It was fantastic, and so did he. And all the other mothers kept stopping me, saying, "Oh, where did you get that from? It's amazing, it's amazing." And then I knew, I knew it was great anyway because I was experiencing it. And then I had another son, and went to buy one from the same shop for him, and they weren't selling them anymore. So tracked down the guy who was distributing them at the time. He was a 23-year-old bloke who was sort of really selling the 2-wheel folding aluminium scooters, and he hadn't realised quite realised how amazing this scooter was at the bottom of the range for the sort of 3-year-old children, 2-3-year-old children. And I said to him, God, I could sell you loads of these. They are just absolutely fantastic. You don't realise how amazing they are. He said, okay, why don't you? So I started selling them to friends. And I used to put my sticker on the bottom with my mobile number, and I'd say to them, you're going to be stopped lots of times. Please give them my number. And I put, little adverts up in Clapham Common, in the playground, in the cafe. And I was selling loads of them, and it was great. And I kept selling them, kept buying more from him. And then suddenly I couldn't get hold of him. And so I contacted the manufacturers, Micro, who are based in Switzerland. And I said, I can't get hold of any more. Why not? And they said, well, he stopped doing it, but we're looking for a new UK distributor. And I'm like, well, lovely, great, but no thanks. Can I buy some more? And they said, well, you'll have to import 64 from Germany. And we were living in a flat in London at the time. I was like, oh my God, how am I going to do that? Okay, so I imported them, and they went to my husband's office, and he would bring them back every day, and we'd shove them under the sofa and behind the armchairs and all the rest of it. And I imported a couple of pallets from Germany, and the second one, literally, I'd sold all of them within 2 weeks.
Wow.
And each time I spoke to the manufacturer, he said to me, we're looking for a UK distributor. Why don't you do it? Well, I had child number 3 on the way. And as you say, I was a lawyer before, so I knew nothing about retail, distribution, logistics, a bit about shipping because I'd been a shipping lawyer, but very little else. But I knew I had a really great product, and I knew everybody wanted it, and I'd sold loads of them. So I at the time I'd met a mate who had children exactly the same age as mine, and I thought, I'm not going to do this on my own. So she and I flew over to Switzerland and said, right, we're up for it. We're going to do it. And they're a really cool bunch. It's a great outfit. They're a fantastic Swiss design. Innovation is their thing, and design, and it's all fantastic quality. And they said, well, do you want to do the whole range? And we're like, well, no, thanks. We just want to do this 3-wheel scooter at the bottom of the range. And we said, by the way, you're making it in blue. You absolutely have got to make it in pink as well. There are loads of 2-year-old girls out there. I know that's that's pretty gender specific, which isn't the way necessarily now, but it was absolutely pink and blue at that stage. And overnight, they produced it in pink, and overnight their sales doubled. So there was a need, there was a requirement for pink, blue, colours, and everything else up until that point had been sort of aluminium. So we flew back to England. They gave us the distribution rights, and we negotiated a deal with them. They said, you've got to sell 8,000 scooters this year to keep the contract. And like, oh my God, how are we going to do that? Between us, we had 6 children. But we did 2 things. One, we set up a website, which sounds pretty obvious now, but it wasn't necessarily then.
E-commerce was in its infancy, really.
Completely.
Yeah.
And everybody else who'd done it before, it literally acted as a typical distributor, which was just to sell to retail. So we were both a wholesaler and a retailer, which didn't go down too well with some of the small customers who were already buying it.
Yeah.
And we said, well, that's the way it is. If you still want to buy some, there were sort of small toy shops and sports shops. But the guy who'd sold it before us was treating it differently. He was selling it into sporting goods shops. But if you're a mother or a parent, a father of a 2-year-old, you're not going to go and look for something for your 2-year-old in a bike shop or a sports shop. No. So we said, where would you buy it? We were like, well, I'd go to John Lewis. It's really good quality products, synonymous with John Lewis, who've been fantastic partners. And so we thought, well, that's where we'd buy it. So we had to try and get it into John Lewis. So that was the starting point.
Okay. So how on earth do you do that? Because the big retailers are
really
synonymous
difficult.
with being difficult to get into, difficult to negotiate with.
Yes.
You know, so many barriers to entry, really. So
Yes.
how did you approach that?
Well, amazingly, I had a friend who knew someone who worked in John Lewis. And so we put together this presentation on an email, and he said, well, I can't do much about it, but I can forward this to the buyer of the toy department, and the rest is up to you. So we did get a reply from the buyer of the toy department, and they said, you know, just drop off a scooter for us so that we know what you're talking about. So my business partners, you know, we drove to Victoria, which is where their head office is, and I didn't just drop it off. I walked into reception. They said, oh, you know, yeah, just drop it here. And I said, no, I'm going to stay here until the buyer comes down, because I know this is a podcast, but it's also recorded, but this is the original scooter. I mean, this is what it looked like. So it's got a lean and steer mechanism. So, and it was just one stem. It didn't have two handles when it was originally invented. And so I knew that John Lewis wouldn't necessarily understand it. They might look at it and think, well, I don't really get that.
Looks like a dinosaur.
Yeah.
And looks like a diplodocus.
Yeah. And I'm not a salesperson at all. But and the thought of sales, I thought, oh, it was so easy to sell, because I think if you're passionate about something and you genuinely believe in it, and I was the customer, then I think it's authentic and it's convincing, and it's sort of
sold itself.
It was came very naturally to me, because it had literally, as I said before, changed my life. So I talked to the buyer, and she said, "Oh, I said, have you got any children?" She didn't have any children. I said, "Well, have you got nephews, nieces? Please, just take it and just get them to try it. Honestly, they'll love it." And sure enough, she came back a week later, phoned up and said, "We'd like to place an order for 600." And it became their best-selling toy, and remains one of their best-selling toys, and was their best-selling toy for 10 years. Wow. And now they sell, a whole range of micro products. And we still work very closely with them. So they've been a really fantastic partner to have. So yeah, it was quite a journey to get them in, and then to negotiate the terms. Settlement terms were very interesting, because they all want various discounts. And of course, we were having none of that. We're just a couple of mums. Why should we be discounting some of our product? Because in your view, we're paying you early. Well, we're not paying you early. You're paying us late because you've got the scooters. So they were good to us, and it worked.
So did you manage to sell your 8,000 then in that first year?
We did. I think within 2 years we'd sold 80,000.
Wow.
I know, which was pretty amazing.
Was that just through John Lewis, or did you go to?
We sort of traipsed around everywhere. Internet it was dial-up internet. So we were literally mums on the ground, and mums on the ground selling to other mums, and selling into as many of the most obvious toy shops as we could think of. And one of those chains was called Cheeky Monkeys. Oh. And of course there was Daisy and Tom on the King's Road, and there was Hamleys and all sorts of different places that we, worked really hard to get into. But one of them was called Cheeky Monkeys. They had about 8 shops all around London. And we'd got a meeting with them. My business partner knew somebody who worked there. And they said, yeah, come to our head office. I think it was in the city somewhere, or the West End. And we walked in and we thought, oh, these offices are rather smart. And we literally just had the scooter, and we were 2 mums, no presentation or anything. And we sat down at this table, and there were sort of 4 people around the table, and we thought, oh, this is quite serious. We were just sort of hoping for an order of 36, 6 for each shop. Mm. Chat. And the head of marketing we were talking to, and the buyer, and the head of marketing said, can you just hold on a sec? And she got on the phone, and she phoned the head of sales, and she said, I've got something I quite like here. Can you just tell me our best ride-on toy, how many do we sell a year? All right, okay, fine. So she got off the phone. She said, so our best-selling ride-on toy sells 13,000 a year. Is that going to be possible? Well, yes, that's absolutely fine.
Absolutely fine.
Of course. We had 400 in a friend's barn in Essex, and that was it. That was it. Anyway, we walked out of the meeting, the lift door shut, and we went, oh, how are we going to manage it? And then we had to get into the whole shipping containers and understanding logistics and finding a warehouse and working out how we had to deliver it to John Lewis. They've got all sorts of packaging requirements. So the learning curve was steep, really steep.
In those circumstances, you're scaling up at pace.
Completely.
What was the sort of key takeaway from that? What if you were doing that again?
I think the key takeaway from that would be to get people in to help you sooner than we did, and to do. I took myself off and did a QuickBooks course. I was doing all the accounts, all of the VAT reconciliation. That was just crazy. I mean, it was good because then you totally understood, and I knew all the margins and all the costings, and we were doing all the merchandising and, poring over the contracts. So just absolutely everything, working out how to set up the website and the payment gateways and, going to visit the warehouse. So I think the key takeaway in answer to your question would be take people on sooner to do those tasks that somebody else, one, can do better than you because it's their area of expertise, but also frees you up then to go off and do the things that matter, which is the brand building and the selling, and working with Micro in Switzerland, who are the inventors. So,
and was the brand already established on the continent?
In Switzerland, yes, and actually, people knew the name Micro because in the year 2000, the company was actually only born sort of 2 or 3 years before us, when they invented Wim, the owner of the business, who's an amazing guy, he reinvented the scooter. So he invented the folding aluminium scooter. And the reason he did was because he wanted to get from A to B to his favourite sausage shop when he worked as a banker in the city.
You always need a sausage.
I know, well, yeah. And it was too far to walk, and there was nowhere to park, so you couldn't get to. And of course, all his friends thought he was totally mad, and no one was interested. So it sat in his garage, and he had 2 boys, and they loved it, got on it. All their mates used to come round, and his wife said to him, I think there's something in this. So he invented the folding aluminium scooter, which is known as the micro scooter, and sold millions of them. I mean, literally millions and millions. And then a copy came out, and the whole business could have sort of fallen off the face of the earth. And I suppose, through the mini micro, the whole business was, well, they stuck with it and invented lots of other things, and the mini micro sort of helped in that process.
And as you said, they've been a great partner because they're always innovating, and that's probably because the person that's running that business is an inventor.
Yeah, absolutely.
So the product didn't stay as it originally was, where you took it to John Lewis as a single stick, the blue one that we've got here with the single steering stick. So were those innovations things that you went to them with and said, look, this isn't working in this market, is there something else you can do, or were they already? I
suppose it was a combination of the two. We brought the mums to Micro in a way, so we were the customers.
Yeah.
So for instance, obviously they invented the mini micro. I would never dare to suggest we had anything to do with that, but we did say make it in pink, and the following year we said make it in red and green and yellow, and it comes in a whole range of colours which appeal to children, and our children were on this mini micro. When they grew out of it, we said to them, look, you need to make the next size up. This lean and steer mechanism is amazing. It's so great for balance, coordination. The kids love it because they really feel like they're surfing. And so we work with them on what size it should be, what colours it should be in. But we weren't working on the mechanics of it, but we're absolutely, and now work very closely with them. They've gone into the nursery market, and, this year they've invented a rocker to go on the bottom of the scooter, which is what we've been talking to them about for a while. So I sort of go over to Switzerland 3 times a year and work with them on product development. And they're always coming up with new concepts. And we're very lucky because they do talk to us about it and ask for our input, which is fantastic. Because at the end of the day,
group, aren't you, really?
Yeah. Yes, yeah. And we'll do exactly that. We'll take 50 back and get the customers to try them. and give them our feedback and suggestions. So yeah, it works well.
I mean, this podcast called Feel Less, Do More. It's about people who've sort of made fearless decisions, and you've pivoted. But when we were talking earlier, you said actually the most fearful thing that you feared the most was actually nothing to do with the business, really. It was about public speaking.
Oh yeah. Oh, I know. And suddenly, that was my. Oh, I used to. At school, they had a debating society, and I used to walk past and I think, I don't know how anybody could do that.
You chose to be a lawyer.
Utterly terrifying. I know, I'm not quite sure why, actually. But that was fine. You see, I don't mind that, negotiating with the other side when you know what all the arguments are and all the... But, when it's to and fro, it's absolutely fine.
Yeah.
But when you've got to suddenly stand up in front of a whole load of people, I used to find that terrifying. And that's not why I went into business. I went into business because I wanted everyone to have a scooter and wanted it to change their lives too. And I loved doing the doing and facing the challenges. But suddenly one of the challenges for me was that I had to do some public speaking. Whether it's to our team or to other distributors, or now we talk at school. I talk at schools, and I've done a bit of work with the Prince's Trust, and so it's a bit easier now, but I still do.
You still get the fear that beforehand. So the business, obviously, we had COVID in the middle. As an outsider, I would say that was probably actually quite a good thing for the business in some ways, because everybody was so limited in what they could do, and the only thing we could do was get out and have a walk every day.
Yes.
And you've got kids in tow, so scooters made that easier, certainly in my family environment. Is that a correct assumption as to how things went?
Funnily enough, actually, when COVID happened, we were, like everybody, just worried about what was going to happen to the business. We didn't know how it was going to affect us.
Yeah.
And in fact, we budgeted for being 50% down because, all of our retailers were going to shut. And, it was a struggle for everybody, but for some reason, we know why, because the brand was established. And scooting micro was synonymous with scooting. And the customer came to us on our website, and we were able to keep the website open. So our warehouse workers were considered to be key workers? Key workers, which was obviously fantastic for us because that was the biggest fear. We had all these people wanting to buy a scooter because I think you're allowed out for an hour.
Yeah,
is that
an hour
right?
A day, yeah.
Oh, terrible, especially with young children. So you're quite right. Scooting was an obvious solution. And up until that point, there were adults riding scooters, but to be honest, everybody just thought you were a bit of a weirdo as an adult if you're on a scooter. And we'd done so much with the marketing trying to get that going and trying to explain to people, well, it takes 6 minutes to scoot the same distance as it takes 20 minutes to walk. And, commuters were cottoning onto it. And it was, a very real solution to, the ever increasing issue of urban congestion. So to us, it was a very obvious solution, but people just, they had to really take a leap of faith in terms of getting on a scooter. Well, COVID changed all of that because suddenly you were scooting as a family. Your kids were out scooting, so adult scooting, really took off even more. Or, it really helped that side of the business. And suddenly people didn't feel like an idiot on a scooter anymore. They were quite smug, actually.
Fear Less, Do More is brought to you by the team at Square One Law. If you're enjoying this episode, hit follow or subscribe. It really helps us out, and it means that you won't miss out on any future episodes. We have some great fearless guests that leave you feeling really inspired. And if you think someone else would enjoy it too, feel free to pass it on, whether that's a mate, a colleague, or someone in your network. Thanks for listening. Now back to the conversation.
So we had lots of adults scooting on and kids scooting together, so that was fantastic. But I think the biggest challenge for us was not necessarily for me, because I was lucky my children were older, but we've got such an amazing team of people, and they, you could see we were on Zoom calls constantly, and were two working parents and they had children at home who they were trying to homeschool and hold down a business. But honestly, they nailed it. They were absolutely fantastic. And we kept the office open, so for the people who wanted to go into the office, they could. And then for the people who didn't, they were set up at home and so could work from home. And, everybody was just buzzing. It was amazing. But they were pretty much at the end of their, tether. So we were sort of sending them welfare hampers and, all trying to get together online. And, it was tough, but it was fantastic for us as a business. Really, really great. But then, of course, the other challenge with that is that a lot of other businesses saw the opportunity, and so all the copycat scooters come out. So that's always a challenge.
And how when that happens, when copycats come out, how do you continue to differentiate in a crowd, what's becoming a crowded market?
Yes, I suppose it's a couple of things. Obviously, there's various IP rights and there's legal. You can go down a legal route to a certain extent, but I think the more important thing is to stay ahead of the game. And Micro have always continued to innovate and improve on the scooters in every single way that they can. And we, as a brand in the UK, we continue to invest in the brand and to educate people as to why we are the premium scooter. And that's really all about telling them about the parts that Micro use and the testing that they do. And the quality of the products really is second to none. And there are very few, I don't think there are any scooter companies that, we offer a spare parts service. So, for instance, my goddaughter, who's now 22, has given the scooter that she was on when she was 2 to her niece, who is 2. So it's lasted 22 years. All it needed was a new brake and a bit of a revamp, and it's absolutely fine. They've got longevity. And especially the folding aluminium scooters, you can hear when it's another scooter coming along the pavement, but you can't hear when it's a Micro because the parts, the bearings, they're all top quality. So it's about really investing in the brand in terms of marketing and educating people as to what's so great about it. I think as well as a business, we've focused, and right from the beginning, we focused on customer service. That's key to us. As a busy parent, you don't want to be on hold for however long. You don't want to be number 10 in the queue. You just want an answer, and you want someone who knows what they're talking about. So we invest in our customer service. It's the most wonderful customer service team. They're just fab. They've been with us, a few of them have been with us nearly 15 years. So,
did you win an award?
Oh yeah, we did. Service, yeah. This year we won the award for Best Customer Service Team in Europe.
That's pretty high accolade.
Yeah. And we really didn't think we were going to. And so the team went to this huge event in London, which was fantastic. We weren't going to go. We said, oh, no, let's not bother going to that. We're not going to win. And they phoned us up and said, we see you're not on the guest list. We really think you ought to come along. So all credit to them. they so deserve it.
That's it. Yeah, it's great for you. It's great for the team to feel like their work's being recognised at that level.
Yeah, and they're completely, they're always looking to see what they can do better, and anything they can do. I remember in the very early days, one of the customers phoning up and saying, it was Christmas and the scooter hadn't arrived, and they were absolutely beside themselves because it was the main present. And the guy from our warehouse said, don't worry, no problem. And he got in his car and he drove the scooter to their house. Now I'm not suggesting we can do that now, but that was pretty, that was how determined we were.
And then another of the things that you have is you're a B Corp.
Yes.
So, as are we. And did that come out of the sustainability sort of agenda around scooters being a sustainable method of transport?
Well, my business partner actually came across B Corp and sort of suggested it. And we've taken millions of cars off the road with children scooting to school. We've basically changed consumer behaviour. People don't drive to school, they scoot to school in London, and that's the whole premise for the business, is a greener, cleaner, healthier way to get to school, helps concentration, good for exercise. And also before that, with the replacement parts, there's longevity in the scooter. The scooters are such good quality that they really do last. So from a sustainable point of view, that's fantastic. And we were already running a program called Scooter Aid, where children were able to, or parents were able to send in scooters either when the child had grown out of it or didn't want it anymore. And we've got a whole department where they revamp those scooters and then send them out to deserving causes. So, we've given away over 5,000 scooters to that through a couple of charities. And we'd already talked to Micro about making an eco deck out of recycled plastics. And I went to China and talked to all of our suppliers, because we are actually manufacturers of all the accessories. That's nothing to do with Micro. So we designed and manufacture helmets, bells, lights, ribbons, bags. And so I spoke to all of our suppliers saying, come on, surely we can make these out of recycled material. So that was sort of already in place. And we thought, gosh, all these, it's all adding up here. Perhaps we can. And we applied and we became a B Corp sort of 3 years ago. And I think what's been positive about it is that it makes you look both up the supply chain and down the supply chain. So things that we weren't doing before, for instance, we spoke to our freight forwarders and said, right, can you get our containers of scooters onto LNG ships, liquid natural gas, so that's much better for the environment. We talked to Micro about taking as much plastic, because the scooters sort of came wrapped in a plastic bag in a box. Not necessary, let's get rid of that. Or where it is necessary, let's use reusable bags.
Yeah.
And the boxes are made out using FSC, so Forestry Commission. So that that was all great. Even down to our landlord, trying to persuade him to put solar panels on the roof of the building and double glazing in the windows. Every sort of little thing down from that up to product development. So and this year will be over 50% of our accessories we sell will be made out of recycled material, and we give 1% to the planet of the profit of those accessories. The office is actually based on Mersey Island, which is in Essex. So we get involved with beach cleans, give the team a day off to do a beach clean. I'm not quite sure how pleased they are about that, but it's good fun. Everybody gets stuck in, and it's I do think it genuinely, it's a force for good. It just makes you think, and if we're all doing our bit, and it gets to challenge the people you're working with. We're working with our delivery, working with the people who deliver the scooters to make sure that the first attempt at delivery works rather than 3 attempts at delivery. So it's all those little things that sort of add up, and it just made us really delve into what we were doing and do even more of what we were already doing, if that makes sense.
Yeah, I mean, it's a rigorous process, and people always say, it's really hard to get. It is, but it should be.
Yes, quite.
Because it has to be meaningful.
Yes.
Because there is a lot of greenwashing goes on generally. But it's also, as you've highlighted there, it's not just about the environment. It's about it's quite broad. So it's about how you engage with your customers and what you do with your suppliers and how you treat your people, what you do in your community, how your governance. So it's all of those. It's quite all encompassing, and for us it provided a framework so that you could do things in a sensible order rather than just trying to do everything at once. So I agree. I think it is an indication that a business is really invested in being a force for good in whatever way is right for that business in their own market. You yourself are also, I know, keen to make a broader impact, not just through the business, and you've recently joined the board of First.
Oh yes, very, very recent. I've only sort of worked with them. In fact, I've got another meeting with them next week. So First are a northeast company, but basically they provide courses and support for people who are thinking about setting up a business. So, and all sorts of courses to help people get into the job market. But obviously, the side I particularly focus on is when people are thinking about setting up a business. So, it's just really in an advisory capacity. I'm sort of fascinated by anybody trying to start a business, because obviously I've been through it. It's hard, really, really hard, all consuming, but very exciting. And I think, if I'm able to share some of that experience, then it's a good thing to do, and I really enjoy it. So they sort of present business ideas, and I'll sort of either give them pointers or make suggestions or challenge them on various things, and that's fun. And I also work with various universities, judge on the judging panel for their final year students who are doing business projects. I've done a bit of stuff with the Prince's Trust, but those sort of first steps of setting up a business, understanding whether or not to take the leap, whether or not you've got a good idea. There are lots of people out there trying to do it, so it's fun. Yeah.
So have you ever listened to an idea about a business, or watched a presentation and thought, that is pretty incredible, I'd like to get involved with that?
Not. I think it's early days yet. Not. Well, a couple of things which I've thought, that they're great, but I think I'm at the beginning of that journey. So I think I would be really interested in getting involved in any businesses that are that have got synergies with mine, or well, not necessarily that, but I believe in. It's more whether or not you believe in and you think it's got legs. Then I really would, but not yet.
So really, I mean, your whole business and your career has come out of a sort of sliding doors moment of your son trying out somebody else's. If that sliding door had gone in the other direction and he had never tried that, what do you think you would have done with your career?
Oh, I don't know. I think I'd have carried on muddling through as a mother of 3 boys. And I think I knew I always wanted to do, I did do a bit of teaching, but I don't think it would have gone down that route. I play the cello and the piano, so I did sort of teach 2 small children a bit of cello in the early days before I discovered the scooter. But, I'd had another couple of business ideas, so I don't know, maybe I'd have gone back to the law, not sure.
It's interesting, isn't it? That life takes you off in a direction because of one particular.
Yeah. I mean, Ed is now 25. Yeah. He's the one that discovered the scooter. Well, he's nearly 25. Imagine if he'd fallen off it, and thought it was fallen flat on his face. We wouldn't be here today.
And are any of the children involved in the business?
No, they're not. But they've been involved over the years. So our youngest is at university. He does live chat. So, he's grown up with scooters all of his life. All of them have been in the photo shoots. They've been in the office when we've been setting up the office. They've been unpacking boxes. My mum used to work in the spares and repairs department, so they'd sit with her and put brakes together whilst I was on calls.
And you've said, obviously, the micro are always innovating. What's next? What's coming for scooters next?
Well, they've actually gone into the nursery market, which is fantastic. So they've just launched a trike and a push chair, which is a sort of 360 push chair. So you can faces one both ways, and it doubles up as a high chair. So if you're out and about. I'd love to have had something like that nowadays. They're all so cumbersome. And a fantastic trike that, it's a sort of four in one. It goes through various stages, so that the child can. And they've just invented a rocker that will go on the bottom of the scooter. And they've just invented a car. Well, not just invented a car. They've been working on an electric car for a while. And it launched in the UK last year, not through us, but through a company called Crazy Horse, who are based in London. They distribute motorbikes, and they're quite a cool outfit, and they know all about cars and servicing cars, which we don't. We're very good at servicing scooters. And it's fantastic. It goes at 95 kilometres an hour. Its range is 90 kilometres. You can recharge it in 4 hours. What I love about it is you can fit 3 cars into the space of a single car parking space, because they park face onto the pavement. So it opens from the front. You can sit 2 people in it, and then in the back you can fit 3 crates of beer. So, and you know, again, it's their solution to, they're always trying to resolve the issue of urban transport, and in a sustainable way. And I think this really does solve an issue. If I was in London, I'd definitely buy one tomorrow. Great for parking. Well, yes, yeah, but you know, great for parking. Majority of journeys that people do are less than a mile, and there's only ever one person in the car, and everybody's sort of trundling around in great big guzzlers. You know, it's just not great for the environment. So they're a very impressive outfit, and it's great business to work with.
And what about you? What would the podcast called Fear Less, Do More? What would you like to do more of?
Well, I've taken a bit of a back step recently, which has been great, which is why I've been doing more of this sort of, helping people who are starting out in their businesses. But obviously I still work with a team, I still work with them on the designs, because we produce all of the designs for the helmets and the bags, anything from a unicorn to a dinosaur to a monster and that's really fun. I love doing that, and I'll continue to work with them on that, and on product development in terms of accessories. And I'll continue to work with Micro on their product development. And I'm beginning to play more music, which I love. And I'd like to do more. It's just great knowing that if my kids phone up, who are now 24, 22 and 21, that I'm there. I'm not racing off to another 10 meetings. So, and obviously their lives are much more transient now. When they were at school, it's very easy. You knew that was the school holidays, so you try and organise all your meetings for term time and then wing it in the holidays. But it's been a juggle, and for me, it was work and children. That was what my life was. So now to have a bit more time back to myself is great. So, friends are hugely important. Just having time to, play a game of tennis and go for a walk and just hang out with them is really, really nice. And do a bit of travel as well. Like doing that. And as I say, playing a lot more music, and I've become a bit more involved with the Glass House, which is an amazing, I know, that's where I bumped into you, wasn't it?
It was,
the Glass House. A great organisation in the Northeast, and their education program's amazing. So just do more of the things that I love, that I haven't really had time for. Yeah.
Well, I hope you enjoy doing all of those things, and thank you on behalf of parents across the country for bringing Micro to our doors. Because certainly, speaking from personal experience, has made lots of journeys a lot easier than they would have been without the scooter.
Yeah.
So thanks for joining me today and telling us a fascinating story.
Thank you. Thanks.
Thanks for listening to this episode of Fear Less, Do More, brought to you by Square One Law. If you found today's conversation inspiring or interesting, we've added a recommendation for what to listen to next. That's either on the screen now or in the show notes. Take care, and we'll see you next time.